Where do our ideas come from? In terms of looking at the way we might develop a story, or we play with an idea and take it from a starting block and pads of paper and the sort of notes that we might write down before we formulate an idea that we have confidence in and we feel good about. Where do those ideas come from? I've been looking this week at the potential, and that's all it is, it's the potential for a story, a novel that is magical, that is a little bit based in the countryside. And looking at the ideas for that, I've been diving into different sorts of books and different sorts of ideas. I've been looking at ordnance survey maps to get a sense of the countryside. I've been looking at books on mythical figures. Here's one on Robin Hood. But I've also been looking at a book on witchcraft, and several books. This is just one of the ones that I've bought this last 10 days or so. This one is about folk tales and the stories that originate in rural lands and places where communities are small, and the tradition of oral storytelling remains strong. So with those sorts of ideas, I've been looking at the potential for a 3-book series. And just looking at some of the ideas here that I've written down, I want to talk about, or rather I want the book to come out of those childhood memories of magic and mystical stories that I still retain very strongly in my mind from childhood, and that I remember my parents reading to me. But the idea of tales and legends is something that has been bubbling up as an idea. I mentioned a book by Sue Scott that I'd read, The Winterfell Stone, and another one called Druid's Oak Farm. Now that we've finished Camp NaNoWriMo, and I'm waiting for that book for the cover to be finished, and then that can be launched, thinking about those sorts of ideas, it's really led me back to my whole upbringing and my time as a kid, and then as an adolescent on my own. But first as a kid with my parents, going into Derbyshire and spending a lot of time in our home Nottinghamshire territories along the River Trent, again and again through Sherwood Forest and the disjointed area that is Sherwood. One of the books I have been reading a lot in the last month is this old book from the 1980s. It's called The Dukeries. The Dukeries are a set of large landed estates and big houses in the centre of Nottingham as a county. And those are private woodlands with 2,000 or 3,000 acres of land, according to which estate you look at and which site you want to visit, but they're privately held, they're very rarely open to the public. But Welbeck Abbey still remains, it's in private hands, it's reverted back to the Duke of Portland who owns it. But a great ancestor of the current Duke of Portland was very much a private man. He didn't like being seen in public, and he spent a huge fortune in those days building underground tunnels so that he could travel through a series of tunnels in his horse-drawn carriage to the railway station at Worksop, and from there he could take the train to London. That's just one idea that I could use in a story in which the tunnels are revisited and things are found and discovered there. Something else I've been reading about this week is the Woollerton Park goblins. There have been several reports of little people, small people with adult human form seen around the lake. It's exciting to think that we can bring our ideas together. First of all, I'm just dropping all the ideas in this particular notebook. So I've got stories about Southwell Minster, about the forest, about the modern visitor centre, about ghosts on the old military road. These are just notes, and basically what I'm doing is, instead of trying to store everything in my head, I just dump these ideas onto paper. Again, these are Nottinghamshire stories, things about Newstead Abbey, creatures seen in the woods at Harlow Woods between Nottingham and Mansfield. A lot of interesting stuff about the Green Man and the myth of, not the myth, the cult of the Green Man. So many of the Christian churches built in rural parts of England, and Southwell in Nottinghamshire is an example of this, were built on the sites of pagan or druidic centres of worship or celebration of the seasons. And in Southwell, for example, in the chapter house, which is part of the Westminster building, but just as an aside that's been built onto a normal nave of a church. It has the most exquisite stone carvings, and in those carvings you see the face of a man peering out from the foliage that's been carved in stone. And the Green Man as a form of celebration of rural life and of the passing of the seasons has been hugely important over the centuries. And it might be that the Green Man had an influence on the Robin Hood legends. There's myth and there's truth mixed up in the stories that we see about Robin Hood. And I want to just think about the story and an idea that I can develop. And so talking today about where we get our ideas and our inspiration from, I'm predominantly going back to books that are in my library, to maps that I've got, to books that I've read years ago. This one, for example, is by a German comedian called Happe Kerkeling, a brilliant book of his walk along the Camino de Santiago, the route that goes from the foot of the Pyrenees in northern France and across the northern areas of Spain and out to the cathedral city of Santiago, Santiago meaning St. James, where the bones or the relics of St. James have been a centre for pilgrimage for hundreds of years, since medieval times. But I've been going through the Happe Kerkeling book, and I've been annotating here the pages in which certain stories or references leap out to me, because having walked the Camino with my son, it's had a big influence on me. He talks about many pilgrims having strange dreams once they are a few days into the pilgrimage, hallucinations during the day, things that happen and memories that crop up on the path. And all of these are good fodder, potentially, for a new story. Think about the ideas and the inspirations and where you are pulling down your ideas. It might be you're doing internet research or web-based research and you're looking for cultural phenomenon which can go into your story. Or you're looking at the idea that there are elements of factual research that you can do online. I happen to have been looking predominantly at paper-based research in the library this week, and it's been a really productive time. But do your research, dig into the stories, dig into the ideas that inspire you, which lead you in a certain direction as you're doing your research, as you're bringing those ideas together. But remember, at the end of the day, the story that you're writing is for you. It will happen to go to an audience once the book is packaged and it's ready to go out. But you're writing for yourself. I'm writing for me predominantly in the books that I write and the subjects that interest me. And I realise that I've had this dormant interest for years, since childhood, in fairy tales and folklore and the mystical sharing of stories from generation to generation within a woodland setting. And I'm just exploring that, and it's becoming useful to use those ideas and the sense I've got of how those little pieces might knit together in the book that I want to write next. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep going. Find half an hour, find an hour today, tomorrow, to keep writing on the thing which motivates you and keeps you inspired to keep picking up your pen and adding words to paper or working on your digital device. I'm using my iPad with a beautiful little tactile keyboard, and you're bringing all your ideas together, no matter how obtuse they might be, or no matter how seemingly unrelated one area of research is that you've been led to by something else you've read. These things connect, and somewhere in there you'll get the plan for, or an idea for your next piece of writing, for your next work. And you're bringing all those things together and they become the basis of your story. You can work on your characters and your setting and your place and the ideas of what might be happening within the story. All of that is potentially a good set of ingredients from which your story will rise off the page and become something that you bring together over the editing process so that it's ready and you can share it with the world. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a great day, and that today or tomorrow and the next day and the next day, you can capture those words. You can push a paragraph forward from here, from the combined sources of ideas that you are gathering information from and concepts from, and you can put it into something which over time, over a few months, can become a new manuscript, and then a finished manuscript, and then an edited manuscript that you can share with your readership, that you can share with the wider world, and they will say, great, I love your book, let me do a review on it. You've connected with people through your writing. It's a wonderful thing to do. Keep writing. If you have a day of doubt today, that's fine. Tomorrow is a fresh day, and you start in that day, and you bring those ideas together, and you capture them, and you put them in a form, and you create story. Wherever you are, happy storytelling, happy writing.